The woman's voice rose through the evening air like smoke from a dying campfire, carrying a lullaby that belonged to ghosts. Benjamin Walsh heard it before he saw her, standing alone at 3 wooden crosses beside what remained of a burned homestead just outside Yuba City, California, her voice cracking on words meant for children who would never hear them again. It was late September in 1874, and the air still carried the scorching memory of summer, though the sun had started its descent behind the Sierra Nevada foothills. Benjamin had been riding for 2 days straight, leading his mare and a pack horse loaded with supplies he had picked up in Sacramento. He was headed back to his small ranch another 20 miles north, but something about that voice made him pull on the reins and sit still in the saddle, listening. The woman did not notice him at first. She stood with her back to the road, her dark hair hanging loose past her shoulders, swaying slightly as she sang. Her dress was simple calico, faded from too many washings, and her shoulders shook with grief that seemed too large for her small frame. Benjamin counted 3 crosses, each one roughly made from lumber that looked salvaged from the ruins of the cabin behind them. Fresh dirt mounded over 3 graves, and wildflowers someone had placed there were already wilting in the heat. "Hush now, my babies," she sang, her voice breaking. "Mama's here, Mama's here. Close your eyes, rest your heads, morning will bring nothing to fear." Benjamin felt something crack open in his chest. He had heard plenty of sad songs in his 32 years, had seen more than his share of graves across the frontier. But there was something about this particular sorrow that reached into him and would not let go. He dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her, and wrapped his horse's reins around a broken fence post that stood at an angle near the road. The woman must have heard the leather creak or his boots on the dry earth, because she turned suddenly, her hand flying to her throat. Her face was tear-streaked and sunburned, her eyes red-rimmed but startlingly blue against her tanned skin. She could not have been more than 25 years old, but grief had carved lines around her mouth that made her look older in some lights and heartbreakingly young in others. "I did not mean to intrude, madam," Benjamin said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "I was just passing through and heard you singing." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her jaw tight as if she was deciding whether to tell him to leave or simply ignore him entirely. Then something in her face softened just a fraction, and she turned back to the graves. "I sing to them every night," she said quietly. "I know they cannot hear me. I know they are gone, but I cannot seem to stop." Benjamin took a few careful steps closer, his hat still in his hands. Up close, he could see the crosses bore names carved into the wood with an unsteady hand. Emma, age 6. Samuel, age 4. Baby Rose, 6 months. The dates of death were all the same, just 2 weeks prior. "What happened here?" he asked, though he could already guess from the charred remains of the cabin and the way the woman held herself like someone who had run out of reasons to keep standing. "Fire," she said simply. "Middle of the night. My husband Thomas tried to get them out, but the smoke was too thick. He went in after Emma and Samuel, got them to the door, but he breathed in too much. He collapsed just outside with them in his arms. I had the baby. I ran out first because she was crying. I thought Thomas was right behind me." Her voice went flat, emotionless, as if she had told this story so many times in her head that it had lost all meaning. "By the time I put Rose down somewhere safe and went back, the roof had caved in. I pulled Thomas out, pulled the children out, but they were already gone. All of them. The baby died 2 hours later from the smoke. I could not save any of them." Benjamin felt the words settle heavy in his gut. He had no response that would not sound hollow, no comfort that would matter against a loss like that. So instead he just stood there, hat in hand, and let the silence stretch between them. "I am Teresa Bailey," the woman said after a while. "This was our homestead. We had been here 3 years trying to make something work. Thomas was a good man, a good father." Her voice caught on the last word. "Benjamin Walsh," he replied. "I have a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Small operation, just me and a couple of hired hands. We raise cattle mostly, some horses." Teresa nodded but did not seem particularly interested. She knelt down beside the smallest grave and straightened the wilted flowers, her movements slow and careful. "Have you got family, Mrs. Bailey? Someone who can help you?" "It's just Teresa now," she said. "And no, my parents died of fever when I was 16. Thomas had a brother back in Missouri, but I have not seen him in years. There is no one." Benjamin looked at the ruins of the cabin, then back at this woman kneeling in the dirt beside 3 graves, and he made a decision that would change both their lives, though neither of them knew it yet. "You cannot stay here," he said. "There is nothing left. Come back to my ranch. I have a spare room in the house. You can stay there until you figure out what comes next." Teresa looked up at him sharply, suspicion crossing her face. "I do not know you. Why would you help me?" "Because no one should be alone with grief like this," Benjamin said simply. "And because I lost someone too, a long time ago. I know what it feels like when the world empties out and you are standing in the middle of it wondering why you are still breathing." Something flickered in Teresa's eyes, recognition maybe, or just bone-deep exhaustion that made arguing seem like too much effort. She looked back at the graves, then at the ruins of her life, then at Benjamin standing there with his hat in his hands and honesty written plain across his weathered face. "I do not have anywhere else to go," she admitted quietly. "Then come with me. No expectations, no obligations. Just a place to rest until you can figure out your next step." Teresa stood slowly, brushing dirt from her dress. She looked at the graves one more time, her lips moving in a silent goodbye, then walked toward Benjamin with her shoulders squared despite the way her whole body seemed to want to collapse. "I do not have much," she said. "Just what I am wearing and a small trunk I managed to save from the fire. It has a few of the children's things in it, some papers, a little money Thomas had hidden." "That is enough," Benjamin said. "We can tie the trunk to my pack horse. You can ride my mare. She is gentle, will not give you any trouble." They worked in silence, Benjamin retrieving the trunk from where it sat beside the road and securing it with rope, while Teresa stood by the graves and sang one more lullaby, her voice barely above a whisper. When she finished, she walked to where Benjamin waited with the horses and let him help her into the saddle, her movements mechanical, like a woman walking through a dream she could not wake from. They rode as the sun set, painting the California hills in shades of orange and purple. Benjamin kept his horse to a slow walk, glancing back occasionally to make sure Teresa was still with him. She rode with her eyes fixed on some point in the distance, her hands loose on the reins, letting the mare follow Benjamin's gelding without any guidance. Night fell before they were halfway to the ranch, and Benjamin made the decision to camp rather than push through in the dark. He found a spot near a creek with enough grass for the horses and some shelter from a stand of oaks. Teresa dismounted without being asked and stood holding the mare's reins while Benjamin unpacked his bedroll and supplies. "I am going to make some coffee and heat up some beans," he said. "You should sit down, rest. It has been a long day." Teresa nodded and sank down onto the bedroll he had spread for her, her eyes following his movements as he built a small fire and set a pot of coffee on to boil. The beans warmed in a tin pan, and the smell of food seemed to wake something in her because she blinked and looked around as if noticing where she was for the first time. "I have not eaten since yesterday morning," she said, sounding surprised by this fact. "Then we will fix that," Benjamin said. He dished out a generous portion of beans onto a tin plate and handed it to her along with a spoon. She ate slowly at first, then faster, as if her body had suddenly remembered it needed fuel to keep going. They ate without talking, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft noises of the horses grazing nearby. When Teresa finished, she set her plate aside and wrapped her arms around her knees, staring into the flames. "Why did you really stop?" she asked, "when you heard me singing?" Most men would have just kept riding. Benjamin poured more coffee into his cup and considered the question. "My wife died 8 years ago," he said finally. "She was pregnant with our first child. Something went wrong and I lost them both. For a long time after that, I was not really living. I was just going through the motions, doing what needed to be done but not caring much about any of it. Then one day I realized I had a choice. I could let the grief eat me alive, or I could find a way to keep going, to build something that mattered even if she was not there to see it. So I bought some land, started the ranch, and I have been working at it ever since." He looked across the fire at Teresa. "When I heard you singing to those children, I heard myself 8 years ago, and I could not just ride past that." Teresa's eyes glistened with fresh tears. "Does it get easier? Does the pain ever stop?" "It changes," Benjamin said honestly. "It gets quieter. You learn to carry it instead of letting it carry you. Some days are harder than others. But yes, eventually you find you can breathe again without it hurting quite so much." "I do not want to forget them," Teresa whispered. "I am afraid if the pain goes away, it means I have forgotten." "You will never forget them," Benjamin said with absolute certainty. "They are part of you. The pain easing does not mean the love goes away. It just means you are healing, and there is no shame in that. They would want you to heal." Teresa pulled her knees tighter to her chest and rocked slightly, a broken sound escaping her throat. Benjamin wanted to go to her to offer some kind of physical comfort, but he sensed she needed space more than she needed touch right now. So he stayed on his side of the fire and waited while she cried, letting her grief pour out under the stars. When she finally quieted, exhaustion had settled over her like a blanket. Benjamin handed her his bedroll and took hers for himself, arranging it on the far side of the fire to give her privacy. "Sleep," he said gently. "I will keep watch. We will reach the ranch by noon tomorrow." Teresa lay down without argument, curling on her side facing the fire. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep, though even in rest her face looked troubled. Benjamin sat with his back against a tree trunk, his rifle across his knees, and watched the fire burn low while he thought about the woman sleeping across from him and the promise he had made without saying the words out loud. He would help her find her way back to the living. He would give her time and space and whatever else she needed, and he would not expect anything in return. The night passed slowly. Benjamin dozed off and on, jerking awake at every small sound until he finally gave up on sleep entirely and just sat listening to the creek and the horses and Teresa's quiet breathing. When dawn started to lighten the eastern sky, he built up the fire and made fresh coffee, and the smell of it woke Teresa. She sat up slowly, her hair tangled and her face creased from the blanket, looking lost until she remembered where she was and why. "Morning," Benjamin said, offering her a cup of coffee. "Morning," she replied, her voice rough from sleep and crying. She accepted the cup and wrapped her hands around it, drawing warmth from the tin even though the morning was already heating up. They ate a quick breakfast of hardtack and dried apples, then packed up the camp and got back on the road. The landscape slowly changed as they rode north, the rolling hills giving way to flatter grazing land dotted with oak trees. Benjamin pointed out landmarks as they passed, a rock formation that looked like a man's profile, A bend in the creek where he had once seen a black bear fishing, a grove of trees where he had camped on his way to buy the land for his ranch. Teresa listened but said little, still wrapped in her grief like a heavy coat she could not take off. Benjamin did not push her to talk. He just kept up a steady stream of quiet commentary, filling the silence without demanding anything from her. They reached the ranch just after midday, as Benjamin had predicted. It was a modest operation, a 2-story wood frame house with a covered porch, a barn large enough for a dozen horses, a bunkhouse for the hired hands, and several corrals spreading out from the main buildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Benjamin could see 2 of his men working near the barn, likely repairing tack or doing some other maintenance work. "It is not much," Benjamin said as they rode up the path to the house, "but it is home." One of the hired hands, a young man named Charlie with sun-bleached hair and a perpetual sunburn, came jogging over to take the horses. He looked curiously at Teresa, but had the good sense not to ask questions. "Good to have you back, boss," Charlie said. "Everything has been quiet. Old Buck threw a shoe yesterday, but I got him fixed up. Martinez is checking the north fence line for breaks." "Good work," Benjamin said. He helped Teresa dismount, then untied her trunk from the pack horse. "Charlie, this is Mrs. Teresa Bailey. She will be staying in the spare room for a while. Make sure the men know to be respectful." Charlie touched his hat brim. "Yes, sir, madam." Teresa nodded at him but did not speak. Benjamin picked up her trunk and carried it toward the house, Teresa following close behind. The interior was simple but clean, furnished with solid handmade pieces that looked built to last. The main room held a large fireplace, a table with 6 chairs, and a comfortable-looking settee near the front window. A kitchen area took up the back portion of the room and stairs led to the second floor. "The spare room is up here," Benjamin said, climbing the stairs with the trunk. "It has a bed, a dresser, a washstand. Not fancy but comfortable enough." He pushed open a door at the end of the hall, revealing a small room with whitewashed walls and a single window that looked out over the corrals. The bed was neatly made with a simple quilt, and everything smelled of sun-dried linen and beeswax. Benjamin set the trunk at the foot of the bed and stepped back. "Make yourself at home. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. I will be downstairs if you need anything." Teresa stood in the middle of the room, her arms wrapped around herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For all of this. I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Benjamin said. "Just rest, heal. That is enough." He left her there and went back downstairs, suddenly aware that he had just invited a grief-stricken widow into his home and had no idea what happened next. He had acted on instinct, on the memory of his own loss, and the way her voice had cracked on that lullaby. But now the reality of the situation settled over him. He had a stranger living under his roof, a woman who had lost everything, and he had just promised to help her without any clear plan for how to do that. But when he thought about turning her away, about leaving her at those graves with nowhere to go and no one to help her, his chest tightened with something that felt like panic. No, he had made the right choice. Whatever came next, they would figure it out together. The first week passed in a haze of careful politeness and uncomfortable silences. Teresa spent most of her time in her room, coming down only for meals that she picked at without much appetite. Benjamin gave her space but made a point of knocking on her door 3 times a day to let her know food was ready. Sometimes she came down, sometimes she did not, and he learned not to take it personally. Charlie and Martinez, the other hired hand, treated her with the kind of exaggerated courtesy men used around women they did not know what to do with. They tipped their hats, mumbled "madam" whenever they saw her, and made themselves scarce otherwise. Benjamin appreciated their discretion, even as he worried about how isolated Teresa seemed. On the 8th day, he was working in the barn when he heard singing. It was so faint at first he thought he had imagined it, but when he stopped hammering the nail he had been driving into a loose board, he heard it again. That same lullaby, coming from somewhere outside. He found Teresa sitting on the porch steps, her knees drawn up and her arms wrapped around them, singing to the empty air in front of her. Her eyes were closed, tears streaming down her face, and she rocked slightly as she sang the words about babies sleeping and morning coming soon. Benjamin's first instinct was to leave her to her grief, but something made him walk over and sit down on the step beside her instead. He did not touch her, did not interrupt, just sat and listened while she sang. When she finished, she opened her eyes and looked at him, not surprised to find him there. "I cannot stop," she said. "Every evening I hear their voices. Emma would always fight bedtime, trying to stay up just a little longer. Samuel would make me sing it 3 times before he would settle. Rose would fall asleep after the first verse, her little hand wrapped around my finger." "Tell me about them," Benjamin said. "What were they like?" Teresa took a shaky breath. Emma was curious about everything, always asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do the birds go at night? How far away are the stars? She wanted to know how the world worked. Samuel was gentle, loved animals more than people sometimes. He would bring home injured rabbits and birds, insisting we had to help them. Rose was just starting to smile, that big gummy smile babies have. She had Thomas's eyes. "They sound wonderful," Benjamin said. "They were my whole world," Teresa whispered. "And now they are gone and I do not know how to be in a world without them." Benjamin understood that feeling better than she knew. "After my wife Caroline died, I felt like someone had cut the strings holding me together. Everything that made sense before just stopped making sense. I did not want to eat or sleep or work. I just wanted to follow her wherever she had gone." "What stopped you?" Teresa asked. "Honestly, I am not sure. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe fear that if I gave up it would mean her death did not matter. Maybe just the fact that my body kept working even when my heart did not. I got up every morning because morning came whether I wanted it to or not. I worked because cattle need feeding and horses need tending. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was still alive and I had to decide what to do about that." Teresa was quiet for a long time, watching the sun set over the hills. "I do not know what to do," she finally said. "I do not know what I am supposed to do next." "You do not have to know right now," Benjamin said. "You can just be here. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself heal. The rest will come when it is ready." "You are very kind," Teresa said, looking at him with those devastating blue eyes. "Kinder than you need to be to a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," Benjamin said simply. "You are someone who needs help and I have help to give. That is all." But even as he said it, he knew it was not quite true. In the week since he had brought Teresa home, he had found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering if she was eating enough, if she was sleeping, if she needed anything. He worried about her in a way that went beyond simple hospitality, and that worried him in turn. The last thing this grieving woman needed was him developing feelings that would complicate an already difficult situation. So he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on being what she needed him to be, a steady presence, someone who asked nothing of her except that she keep breathing, keep existing, keep moving forward even when forward was just making it through another day. As September turned into October, Teresa began emerging from her room more often. She started helping with cooking, insisting she needed something to do with her hands. Benjamin came home one evening to find her kneading bread dough at the kitchen table, flour dusting her arms up to her elbows, and the sight of her in his kitchen doing something so domestic made his heart skip in a way he had not felt in years. "I hope you do not mind," she said when she noticed him watching. "I found the flour and yeast in the pantry, and I thought fresh bread might be nice." "I do not mind at all," Benjamin said. "I have been buying bread in town because I am terrible at making it. This is a welcome change." Teresa almost smiled. It was not quite there, just a slight softening around her mouth, but it was the closest he had seen her come to something other than grief since he had found her at those graves. The bread was excellent, and they ate it warm with butter and honey, sitting at the table while Charlie and Martinez took their portions out to the bunkhouse to give them privacy. Benjamin found himself telling Teresa about his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to expand the herd, maybe bring in some breeding stock to improve the quality of his cattle. She listened and asked questions that showed she understood more about ranching than he had expected. "Thomas and I ran a small farm back in Missouri before we came west," she explained. "Nothing as large as this, but I know my way around livestock and crops. When we got the homestead here, Thomas was so excited about the possibilities. He had big dreams." Her voice caught on the last word, but she swallowed hard and continued. "He wanted to prove we could make something of ourselves out here." "He did prove it," Benjamin said gently. "You both did. You built a life together, raised a family, made a home in a hard place. That took courage." "A lot of good it did," Teresa said bitterly. "One fire and everything was gone." "The fire took your home and your family," Benjamin said, "but it did not take away what you built together. Those years still happened. The love still mattered. Nothing can take that away from you." Teresa looked at him with something between gratitude and anguish. "You say that like you believe it." "I do believe it. Caroline and I only had 2 years together, but those 2 years made me who I am. The fact that she is gone does not make our time together any less real or important." "Do you still miss her?" "Every day," Benjamin admitted. "But it does not hurt the way it used to. Now it is more like she is a part of me, woven into everything I do. When I make decisions about the ranch, I think about what she would have wanted. When I see something beautiful, I wish I could share it with her. She is gone, but she is not really gone. Does that make sense?" "It does," Teresa whispered. "I feel them with me sometimes. Emma's curiosity in every question I ask myself. Samuel's gentleness when I am kind to one of the animals. Rose's sweetness in moments of unexpected joy. If I let myself feel it, they are still here in small ways." "Then hold on to that," Benjamin said. "Let them be part of how you move forward instead of part of what is holding you back." They talked late into the night, the conversation ranging from memories of lost loved ones to plans for the future, to silly observations about the ranch hands and their quirks. Benjamin found himself laughing for the first time in weeks, and when Teresa laughed too, a small rusty sound like she had forgotten how, he felt something warm unfurl in his chest. After that night, things shifted between them. Teresa took on more responsibilities around the house, cooking and cleaning and even helping Benjamin with the ranch accounts when she discovered he was terrible at keeping his books organized. She had a head for numbers and a practical approach to problem solving that Benjamin found invaluable. Within a month, she had reorganized his entire record-keeping system and identified several places where he was losing money unnecessarily. "You need to sell these older steers before winter," she said one evening, pointing at the ledger. "They are eating resources without providing value. Take them to market now while prices are still decent, then use that money to buy younger stock in the spring." Benjamin looked at the numbers she had laid out and realized she was absolutely right. "How did you learn to do this?" "My father was a banker before he died. He taught me bookkeeping when I was young. Thomas used to joke that I was better at managing money than he was." The mention of her husband's name still brought pain to her eyes, but it was a quieter pain now, one she could speak through. As October gave way to November, the weather turned cooler and the ranch work shifted to preparing for winter. Benjamin spent long days mending fences, checking on the cattle, and making sure they had enough feed stored up for the cold months ahead. Teresa often packed him lunch and brought it out to wherever he was working, staying to talk while he ate. One afternoon, she found him in the north pasture fixing a section of fence that had been knocked down by a fallen tree. She brought bread and cheese and apples, and they sat on the ground with their backs against the tree trunk, eating and watching the cattle graze. "Can I ask you something?" Teresa said after a while. "Anything? Why have you never remarried? After Caroline died, I mean. It has been 8 years." "You must have had opportunities." Benjamin considered the question carefully. "I suppose I never met anyone who made me feel like I wanted to try again. After Caroline, the thought of opening myself up to that kind of loss again just seemed impossible. It was easier to focus on the ranch, to build something concrete instead of risking my heart." "And now?" Teresa asked, her voice quiet. Benjamin looked at her, this woman who had come into his life singing a lullaby to ghosts, who had been broken and was slowly piecing herself back together. He saw the way the sunlight caught in her dark hair, the strength in her delicate hands, the sharp intelligence in those blue eyes that had seen too much sorrow. And he realized with a start that somewhere along the way, he had started falling in love with her. "Now I think maybe I was wrong," he said carefully. "About it being easier to avoid risk. Maybe the point of living is to keep opening yourself up to possibilities even when you know they could hurt you." Teresa held his gaze for a long moment, and Benjamin saw something flicker in her expression, recognition maybe, or the first stirrings of feeling something beyond grief. But then she looked away, breaking the moment. "I do not know if I am ready for possibilities," she said quietly. "Some days I can barely manage the present." "I know," Benjamin said, "and I am not asking you to be ready. I just wanted you to know that when you are, if you are, I will be here." They sat in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that existed between people who understood each other without needing words. When they finally packed up and headed back to the house, walking side by side across the field, Benjamin felt something had shifted between them again, some unspoken acknowledgement of feelings that were growing despite the grief and loss that had brought them together. November turned cold and rainy, keeping everyone close to the house for days at a time. Teresa and Benjamin fell into domestic routines that felt natural and right, cooking together, maintaining the house, sitting by the fire in the evenings and reading or talking, or just existing in comfortable companionship. Charlie and Martinez had taken to eating in the bunkhouse most nights, sensing that their boss and his house guest needed privacy, even if neither of them had said so explicitly. One evening when the rain was coming down hard enough to drum against the roof, Teresa was darning socks by the firelight while Benjamin worked on oiling a saddle that needed repair. The domesticity of the scene struck him suddenly, how right it felt to have her here, how much fuller his life had become since she arrived. "I have been thinking," Teresa said without looking up from her work, "about what I want to do next." Benjamin's hand stilled on the saddle leather. "And what have you decided?" "I want to stay here," she said quietly. "If you will have me, not forever necessarily, but for a while longer. I know I cannot keep accepting your charity without contributing something more substantial. So I was thinking I could help run the house properly, manage the accounts, maybe even help with some of the lighter ranch work. You could pay me a fair wage for housekeeper and bookkeeper, and I would have a place to be while I figure out my future." Benjamin set down the saddle and looked at her. You do not need to earn your place here, Teresa. You are welcome to stay as long as you want, no strings attached. But I want to contribute, she insisted, finally meeting his eyes. I need to feel useful. I need to feel like I am building towards something instead of just existing in the kindness of others. All right, Benjamin said. If that is what you need, we can make it formal. But you should know that you already contribute more than you realize. This house feels like a home again with you in it. That is worth more than any wage I could pay you. Teresa's eyes glistened with sudden tears. You really mean that? I really do. She set down her darning and crossed to where he sat, and for the first time since he had met her, she reached out and touched him deliberately, placing her hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Benjamin, for everything, for hearing me that day at the graves, for bringing me here, for giving me time to heal. I do not know where I would be without you. Benjamin covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of her skin through the fabric of his shirt. I am glad I stopped, he said simply. I am glad you are here. They stayed like that for a moment, hands touching, eyes locked, something unspoken passing between them. Then Teresa pulled away and returned to her chair, picking up her darning with hands that trembled slightly. Benjamin watched her for a moment longer, then went back to oiling the saddle, but his mind was racing and his heart was beating faster than it had any right to. December brought the first real cold snap, frost on the ground in the mornings and ice forming at the edges of the water troughs. Benjamin and his hired hands worked hard to keep the livestock fed and watered, breaking ice and hauling hay and checking for any animals in distress. It was brutal work, and Benjamin came home every night exhausted and half frozen. Teresa took to having hot coffee waiting for him, and sometimes a bath drawn in the big copper tub they kept in the kitchen near the stove. The first time Benjamin came home to find the tub filled and steaming, he had been almost moved to tears by the thoughtfulness of it. You do not have to do this, he said. I know, Teresa replied. I want to. She would disappear upstairs while he bathed, giving him privacy, but the intimacy of the gesture was not lost on either of them. She was caring for him in a way that went beyond household duties, and they both knew it. One particularly brutal evening when Benjamin came home nearly hypothermic after spending hours in a sleet storm searching for a missing calf, Teresa took one look at him and practically shoved him toward the tub. His hands were shaking too hard to undress himself properly, and after watching him struggle with his buttons for a moment, she crossed to him with determination in her eyes. Let me help, she said quietly. Benjamin started to protest, but the cold had seeped so deep into his bones that he could barely form words. Teresa unbuttoned his shirt with efficient movements, not looking at his face, treating it like a practical necessity rather than anything improper. She helped him peel off the wet layers until he was down to his union suit, then turned her back while he stripped that off and climbed into the hot water. The heat was almost painful at first, but gradually it seeped into his frozen muscles and he felt human again. Teresa kept her back turned but stayed in the room, talking to him about mundane things, the bread she had baked that morning, a letter she had received from Thomas's brother in Missouri, the way Charlie and Martinez had been arguing good-naturedly about the best way to shoe a horse. Her voice washed over him like the hot water, warming him from the inside out. When he finally climbed out of the tub, she handed him a towel without turning around, and he wrapped it around his waist before telling her it was safe to look. She turned and studied him with a critical eye, looking for signs of frostbite or hypothermia. Your hands are still blue, she said, taking them in hers and chafing them gently. And your lips. Sit by the fire. I will bring you hot food and more coffee. Benjamin did as he was told, wrapping himself in a blanket and sitting as close to the fire as he could get. Teresa brought him soup and bread and stayed nearby while he ate, refilling his coffee cup and watching him with worried eyes. "Did you find the calf?" she asked. "Yes, stuck in a ravine. Managed to get her out and back to her mother, but it took longer than it should have." "You could have died out there," Teresa said, her voice sharp with something that sounded like fear. "But I did not," Benjamin pointed out gently. "But you could have." She knelt beside his chair, looking up at him with fierce intensity. "You are the only person I have left in this world, Benjamin Walsh. I cannot lose you too." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Benjamin reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You are not going to lose me," he said quietly. "I am not going anywhere." Teresa leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. Promise me you will be careful out there." "I promise." She opened her eyes and looked at him, and Benjamin saw everything he had been feeling reflected back at him in her gaze. Love, fear, hope, longing, all tangled up with grief and healing and the courage it took to try again after loss. "Teresa," he began, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. "Not yet," she whispered. "I am not ready yet, but soon, I think soon." Benjamin kissed her fingers gently, then let her pull away. She stood and busied herself with cleaning up the kitchen, but the air between them had changed, charged with the electricity of feelings finally acknowledged even if not yet acted upon. Christmas came, and Benjamin found himself wishing he had something special to give Teresa. He was not much for shopping, and Yuba City did not offer many choices, but he rode into town anyway a few days before Christmas and spent an hour in the general store trying to find something that felt right. He finally settled on a beautiful shawl, deep blue like her eyes, made of soft wool that would keep her warm through the winter. He also bought peppermint sticks and oranges and a small bottle of real vanilla extract, because he knew she loved to bake, and it was hard to come by out here. On Christmas morning, he woke to the smell of cinnamon and sugar and followed his nose downstairs to find Teresa pulling rolls from the oven, her face flushed from the heat and her hair tied back with a ribbon. "Merry Christmas," she said, smiling at him. It was a real smile, the first fully unguarded one he had seen from her, and it made her whole face light up. "Merry Christmas," he replied, unable to take his eyes off her. They ate the sweet rolls with coffee, and then Benjamin presented her with the wrapped shawl and the other small gifts. Teresa's eyes went wide when she unfolded the shawl, running her fingers over the soft wool. "Benjamin, this is too much," she protested. "It is not nearly enough," he said. "Not for everything you have done for me for this place." "I have something for you too," Teresa said shyly. She pulled a wrapped package from behind the settee and handed it to him. Inside were 2 new shirts, beautifully made with even stitching and pearl buttons. "I made them from fabric I bought in town a few weeks ago. I noticed all your good shirts were getting threadbare." Benjamin was genuinely touched. The shirts were finely crafted, better than anything he could have bought, and the fact that she had made them with her own hands meant more than any store-bought gift ever could. "They are perfect," he said. "Thank you." They spent the day together, just the two of them since Benjamin had given the hired hands time off to visit family or friends. They cooked a small turkey and roasted vegetables, and Teresa made a pie from dried apples that was the best thing Benjamin had ever tasted. They ate and talked and laughed, and when evening came, they sat by the fire with mugs of hot cider and watched the flames dance. "This is the first day since the fire that I have felt truly happy," Teresa said quietly. "I did not think I would ever feel happy again." "I am glad you are here," Benjamin said. "I cannot imagine spending this day any other way." Teresa set down her cider and turned to face him fully. "Benjamin, I need to tell you something." His heart started beating faster. "All right." "I am in love with you," she said simply. "I do not know when it started exactly. Maybe when you sat beside me that first day I sang on your porch. Maybe when you drew me a bath because you were worried about me caring for you. Maybe it was 100 small moments that added up to something I can no longer ignore. I know it has not been very long. I know I am still healing from losing my family. But I also know that what I feel for you is real, and I am tired of pretending it is not there." Benjamin felt like someone had just handed him the sun. "Teresa," he breathed. "I have been in love with you for months. I did not want to say anything because I thought it was too soon, that you needed time. But every day I wake up grateful you are here, and every night I go to sleep thinking about you. You have brought my life back to color after years of gray." "Kiss me," Teresa whispered. Benjamin did not need to be asked twice. He leaned forward and captured her lips with his, gentle at first, then deeper when she responded by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer. She tasted like apples and cinnamon, and kissing her felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Teresa was crying. "I did not think I could have this again," she said. "Love, hope, a future. I thought it died with Thomas and the children." "You can have all of that and more," Benjamin promised. "If you want it, if you will have me." "I want it," Teresa said fiercely. "I want you. I want a life together. I want to build something new while still honoring what came before." They kissed again, and this time when they pulled apart, they were both smiling through their tears. Benjamin took her hand and held it against his chest, over his heart. "Marry me," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but when you are ready. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Teresa said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other by the firelight, making quiet plans for the future. They would marry in the spring, they decided, when the weather was better and the wildflowers were blooming. It would be a small ceremony, just them and a few witnesses, something simple and heartfelt. And after that, they would build a life together, running the ranch, maybe eventually having children if Teresa felt ready for that again. "I do not want to replace Emma and Samuel and Rose," Teresa said carefully. "If we have children, they will be their own people, not replacements for who I lost." "I understand," Benjamin said. "And I would never expect you to forget them. They will always be part of you, and that means they will be part of us." As winter melted into spring, Teresa and Benjamin's relationship deepened. They were openly affectionate now, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking, holding hands across the dinner table, falling asleep together on the settee after long evenings by the fire. Charlie and Martinez were not surprised when Benjamin announced the engagement, both of them offering congratulations and teasing him good-naturedly about finally settling down. Teresa's grief did not disappear, but it changed shape. She still visited the graves of her family once a month, making the ride to the burned homestead and spending time there with her memories. Benjamin always offered to go with her, but she preferred to go alone, and he respected that. She would come back quiet and sad, but no longer devastated, and she would let Benjamin hold her while she cried, and then she would move forward again. In early April, they traveled to Yuba City to arrange for the wedding and buy a proper dress for Teresa. She chose something simple, cream-colored with lace at the collar and cuffs, modest but beautiful. Benjamin bought a new suit and felt ridiculous and proud at the same time when the tailor measured him and promised it would be ready in 2 weeks. They set the date for the first Saturday in May, and in the days leading up to it, the ranch buzzed with activity. Charlie and Martinez cleaned and repaired everything they could find, determined to make the place look its best. Teresa cooked and baked, preparing food for the small gathering they were planning. Benjamin found himself nervous in a way he had not expected, worried about everything going right, wanting the day to be perfect for her. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue and the hills covered in wildflowers. They held the ceremony in the yard outside the house, with a traveling preacher who served the scattered ranches and homesteads in the area. Charlie and Martinez stood as witnesses, along with a couple from a neighboring ranch who had become friends with Teresa. Teresa looked breathtaking in her cream dress, her dark hair pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. Benjamin felt his throat get tight when he saw her walking toward him, her eyes shining with love and hope and a joy that had seemed impossible just months ago. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other, to build a life together while honoring the past, to be partners in all things. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed Teresa thoroughly enough to make Charlie whistle and everyone else laugh. They celebrated with a meal that Teresa had spent days preparing, roasted beef and fresh bread and vegetables and several pies. There was music too, Martinez playing a guitar he had brought from the bunkhouse and Charlie joining in with a harmonica, filling the air with cheerful melodies. Benjamin danced with his new wife under the open sky, holding her close and feeling like the luckiest man alive. As the sun set and their guests departed, Benjamin carried Teresa over the threshold of the house, making her laugh with delight. They had decided to turn the spare room where she had been staying into a proper office for the ranch accounts and move her belongings into Benjamin's room, their room now. That night, they lay together in the big bed, Teresa's head on Benjamin's chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she murmured. "Thank you for not riding past me that day." "Thank you for singing loud enough for me to hear," Benjamin replied, kissing the top of her head. They made love slowly and tenderly, learning each other, giving and receiving comfort and pleasure in equal measure. Afterward, they talked late into the night about their dreams for the future, the plans they wanted to make, the life they would build together. Summer arrived hot and bright, and Benjamin and Teresa settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They worked side by side during the days, Benjamin managing the livestock and physical labor, while Teresa handled the accounts and household, and often helped with the lighter ranch work. She was surprisingly good with horses, and Benjamin started teaching her to train them, discovering she had a natural gift for it. Evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sun set and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Teresa would sing, though no longer lullabies to absent children. Instead, she sang old folk songs and ballads, her voice clear and beautiful in the quiet evening air. Benjamin would listen and feel grateful for every single day they had together. In late August, Teresa realized she was pregnant. She told Benjamin one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He saw fear and hope warring in her eyes, knowing she was thinking about the baby she had lost in the fire, about the risk of opening her heart to another child after such devastating loss. "How do you feel about it?" he asked gently. "Terrified," Teresa admitted, "but also excited." "I want this baby, Benjamin. I want to be a mother again, but I am scared of losing someone else I love." "We will be scared together," Benjamin said, pulling her into his arms, "and we will get through it together. Whatever happens, we face it as a team." The pregnancy was not easy. Teresa was sick most of the first 3 months, and Benjamin hovered anxiously, bringing her ginger tea and crackers and anything else that might help. As she grew bigger, her anxiety increased, and some nights she would wake from nightmares about fires and smoke and losing this child like she had lost Rose. Benjamin would hold her through those dark moments, talking her down from her panic, reminding her that this was not the past, that they were safe, that the baby was strong and healthy. He accompanied her to every appointment with the midwife in town, asking questions and memorizing every piece of advice about keeping mother and baby healthy. As winter approached, they prepared a nursery in one of the spare rooms. Teresa sewed blankets and tiny clothes, and Benjamin built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving delicate patterns into the sides. They tried not to get too attached, tried not to hope too hard, but it was impossible not to love the life growing between them. In early March of 1876, on a cold, clear night with the stars bright overhead, Teresa went into labor. The midwife arrived and took over with calm efficiency while Benjamin paced outside the bedroom, alternating between prayer and panic. Charlie and Martinez tried to distract him with cards and conversation, but he was too worried to focus on anything except the sounds coming from upstairs. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 8 hours, he heard the sharp cry of a newborn, and his knees nearly gave out from relief. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling broadly. "Congratulations, Mr. Walsh. You have a healthy son and your wife is doing fine. You can come up now." Benjamin took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the room to find Teresa propped up against the pillows, exhausted and tear-stained but glowing with joy. In her arms was a tiny, red-faced baby, wrapped in one of the blankets she had sewn. "Benjamin, meet your son," she said softly. Benjamin approached slowly, almost afraid to touch this precious new life. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air, protesting the indignity of being born. When Benjamin gently touched one of those fists, the baby's fingers curled around his and Benjamin felt his heart crack open all over again. "He is perfect," Benjamin whispered. "You are both perfect." "I was thinking we could name him James," Teresa said. "James Benjamin Walsh." "If that is all right with you." "James," Benjamin repeated, testing the name. "I love it." He sat on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Teresa, the two of them looking down at their son in wonder. This was what they had been building toward, Benjamin realized. This moment right here, this family they had created out of grief and hope and the courage to love again. The first year with James was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He was a good baby overall, but babies are demanding by nature, and both Benjamin and Teresa found themselves operating on very little sleep. Charlie and Martinez were surprisingly helpful, often taking turns holding the baby so Teresa could rest or handle other work. Teresa was a wonderful mother, patient and loving but also practical. She did not coddle James unnecessarily, but gave him space to explore and learn. Benjamin loved watching her with their son, seeing the way her face lit up when James smiled, the gentle way she soothed him when he cried, the fierce protectiveness that flared whenever she thought he might be in any danger. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Benjamin gave Teresa a gift he had been working on for months. It was a painting, something he had commissioned from an artist in Sacramento. It showed Teresa standing at 3 crosses with wildflowers in her hands, but instead of being alone, Benjamin stood beside her now, and at their feet a small boy played among the flowers. "I wanted you to have something that honored where you came from while showing where you are now," Benjamin explained, as Teresa stared at the painting with tears streaming down her face. "Emma and Samuel and Rose will always be part of your story. But now you have James and you have me, and we are all part of something new together. It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," Teresa whispered. "Thank you." They hung the painting in their bedroom, and sometimes Benjamin would catch Teresa looking at it with a soft expression on her face. touching the frame gently as if she could reach through it and touch the children she had lost. Life continued its steady rhythm. James grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk and talk and get into everything. The ranch prospered under their joint management, expanding as they brought in more cattle and better breeding stock. Benjamin taught Teresa everything he knew about ranching, and she surprised him constantly with her ideas and instincts. When James was 2, Teresa got pregnant again. This time the fear was less, though not entirely gone. The pregnancy was easier too, and in the spring of 1879 they welcomed a daughter they named Caroline, after Benjamin's first wife. Teresa had suggested it, wanting to honor the woman who had made Benjamin the man he was, the man Teresa had fallen in love with. Benjamin cried when he held his daughter for the first time, thinking about the wife and child he had lost, grateful for the wife and children he had now. Life had given him a second chance, and he was determined not to waste a single moment of it. The years passed in a blur of children and ranch work and love. They had 2 more children, another son they named Thomas after Teresa's first husband, and a daughter they named Emma after Teresa's eldest from her first family. It felt right to Benjamin, giving these names to their children, keeping the memory of loved ones alive while building something new. Teresa never forgot the family she lost. Every year on the anniversary of the fire, she would ride out to the graves and spend time there, sometimes alone, sometimes with Benjamin and the children. She would tell James and Caroline and Thomas and Emma about their half-siblings, about the brave little girl who asked questions and the gentle boy who loved animals and the sweet baby who barely had time to exist. They are part of our family too, she told them. Even though they are gone, they are still part of who we are. Benjamin would stand beside her at those graves and marvel at her strength, at the way she had taken the worst thing that could happen to a person, and somehow transformed it into wisdom and compassion and love that spilled over onto everyone around her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they threw a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the yard with laughter and music and celebration. Their 4 children ran wild with the other kids, and Benjamin and Teresa danced together as the sun set, just like they had on their wedding day. "Do you ever regret it?" Benjamin asked as they swayed to the music. "Marrying me, building this life?" "Not for a single second," Teresa said fiercely. "You saved me, Benjamin. You heard me singing to ghosts and you promised me a future, even if you did not say the words out loud at the time. You kept that promise every single day." "You saved me too," Benjamin said. "I was just going through the motions before you arrived. You reminded me what it felt like to really live." They kissed there in front of everyone, neither of them caring who saw. Their children made exaggerated gagging sounds and their friends cheered, and the music played on. As the years continued to pass, Benjamin and Teresa grew older but no less devoted to each other. Their children grew up strong and capable, taking on more responsibility around the ranch as they matured. James turned out to have his mother's head for business and his father's way with animals. Caroline was quieter but fiercely intelligent, already talking about becoming a teacher. Thomas had his namesake's adventurous spirit, always wanting to explore beyond the boundaries of the ranch. And Emma, their youngest, had inherited her mother's beautiful singing voice and used it liberally. When James turned 20, he started courting a girl from town, a sweet schoolteacher named Mary who fit into their family like she had always been there. They married when James was 22, and Benjamin and Teresa became grandparents a year later when Mary gave birth to twin boys. "I cannot believe I am old enough to be a grandmother," Teresa said, holding one of the twins while Benjamin held the other. "You are the most beautiful grandmother I have ever seen," Benjamin assured her, earning an eye roll and a smile. More grandchildren followed as their other children married and started families of their own. The ranch expanded to accommodate the growing family, with new houses built for the younger generation and their families. What had started as Benjamin's solitary operation had become a true family enterprise, with everyone contributing their skills and energy. Through it all, Benjamin and Teresa remained at the center, the foundation on which everything else was built. They still took evening walks together, still sat on the porch and watched the sun set, still found moments of privacy to remind each other why they had fallen in love in the first place. One summer evening when they were both in their 60s, they rode out together to the site of Teresa's old homestead. The burned cabin was long gone, reclaimed by the earth, but the three crosses still stood, weathered and worn but maintained by Teresa's regular visits. They stood there holding hands as the sun set, and Teresa sang that old lullaby one more time, her voice wavering with age but still beautiful. Benjamin listened like he had that very first time, feeling the same pull in his chest, the same sense that this moment mattered in ways he could not fully articulate. "You think they know?" Teresa asked when the song ended. "Emma and Samuel and Rose, you think they know I am happy? That I found love again and built a new family? I think they know," Benjamin said, "and I think they are glad. No parent wants their children to suffer forever. They would want you to heal, to love, to live. I like to think they sent you to me," Teresa said softly. "That they knew I needed someone and they made sure you heard me singing that day." "Maybe they did," Benjamin agreed. "Or maybe it was just luck. Either way, I am grateful every single day that I stopped." "I am grateful you listened," Teresa said. "And I am grateful you kept the promise you made without knowing you were making it." "What promise was that?" "To give me a future, to give me children again, to give me love and hope and reasons to keep going." Benjamin pulled her close, this woman who had changed his life, who had taken his empty house and filled it with laughter and love and family. "That was the easiest promise I ever kept." They rode back to the ranch as darkness fell, the lights from their house visible from miles away, warm and welcoming. Their children and grandchildren were waiting for them, gathered for the weekly family dinner they still maintained no matter how busy everyone got. As they dismounted and walked toward the house, Benjamin looked around at everything they had built, this life they had created out of ashes and grief and the courage to try again. The ranch was thriving, their children were happy and healthy, their grandchildren were growing up surrounded by love and possibility. "We did good," he said to Teresa. "We did very good," she agreed, squeezing his hand. They walked inside together, into the noise and warmth and chaos of a large family gathering. Emma was already at the piano, playing while several of the grandchildren sang along. Caroline was helping her mother-in-law set the table while simultaneously keeping an eye on a toddler trying to escape out the back door. Thomas was deep in conversation with James about expanding into horse breeding. Mary was bouncing a crying baby while trying to pour wine for the adults. It was loud and messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. After dinner, when the children had been put to bed and the adults were sitting around with coffee and conversation, one of the grandsons climbed into Teresa's lap and asked her to sing. She hesitated, then caught Benjamin's eye across the room. He nodded encouragingly, and she launched into a lullaby, not the sad one from her past, but a new one, something hopeful and sweet about stars and dreams and morning light. The room gradually quieted as everyone stopped to listen, and Benjamin watched his wife singing to his grandson and felt the circle complete itself. She had been singing to ghosts when he found her, her voice full of grief and loss. Now she sang to a new generation, her voice full of love and hope and all the tomorrows they had built together. When the song ended and the grandson had drowsed off to sleep in her arms, Teresa looked at Benjamin across the room and smiled. That same smile that had first broken through her grief all those years ago. The smile that had told him healing was possible even after the worst loss imaginable. Benjamin smiled back, his heart full of gratitude for the woman who had taught him that it was never too late to start over, that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that the human heart was capable of healing if you gave it time and patience and the courage to try. Years continued to roll by, bringing the changes that time always brings. Benjamin and Teresa grew older, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but their love undimmed. They passed more responsibility to their children, trusting them to carry on what had been built, but they remained active in the life of the ranch and the family for as long as they were able. Eventually, the day came when Benjamin's health began to fail. He had lived a hard life, and his body was finally wearing out. Teresa nursed him through his final illness with the same fierce devotion she had brought to everything else in their life together, never leaving his side, holding his hand through the pain and the fear. "I am not ready to leave you," Benjamin said one evening when they both knew the end was approaching. "I know," Teresa said, tears streaming down her face. "I am not ready to let you go, but we have had 30 years together, Benjamin. 30 years of love and family and joy. That is more than most people get. That is more than I ever hoped for when you found me at those graves. Promise me you will be all right," Benjamin whispered. "Promise me you will not stop living just because I am gone." "I promise," Teresa said. "You taught me how to survive loss and come out the other side. I will grieve you, but I will not let the grief destroy me. I have too many reasons to keep going, too many people who need me. Our children, our grandchildren, they all need their mother and grandmother. I will be here for them." Benjamin died peacefully a few days later, surrounded by his family, with Teresa holding his hand and whispering how much she loved him, how grateful she was for every moment they had shared. It was the spring of 1904, and he was 62 years old. Teresa grieved deeply, but did not break. She had learned how to carry loss, how to honor the dead while continuing to live for those who remained. She stayed on at the ranch, still managing the accounts, still helping with decisions, still gathering the family together for weekly dinners and holidays and celebrations. She lived another 12 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch the ranch grow into one of the most successful operations in the region. She told stories about Benjamin to the younger grandchildren who had never known him, keeping his memory alive, making sure they understood the man who had built the foundation for everything they enjoyed. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch and sing, sometimes lullabies to whatever child needed soothing, sometimes old folk songs just for herself. And sometimes, when she was alone, she would sing that particular lullaby, the one she had been singing when Benjamin found her. But now it was for all of them, Emma and Samuel and Rose and Thomas and Benjamin, all the people she had loved and lost who were waiting for her on the other side. When Teresa died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 67, her children buried her next to Benjamin on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the Sierra Nevada in the distance and wildflowers growing all around. At her funeral, Emma sang the lullaby her mother had sung so many times, and there was not a dry eye among the huge gathering of family and friends. But the story did not end there, because the life they had built together continued. Their children kept the ranch running, passing it to their children, who passed it to theirs. The name Walsh became synonymous with quality cattle and horses in Northern California, and the family remained close-knit and loving, maintaining the traditions Benjamin and Teresa had established. Every year on Teresa's birthday, the family would gather at those graves on the hillside, and someone would sing that lullaby, keeping the memory alive, honoring the woman who had lost everything and found the courage to build something new, honoring the man who had heard a stranger singing and had stopped to offer hope. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across those hills, people swore they could hear singing, a woman's voice carrying an old lullaby through the air, peaceful now, no longer filled with grief but with contentment and love and the satisfaction of a life well lived and promises kept. The woman was singing a lullaby to no one, and the cowboy listened and promised her children she would survive, she would heal, she would love again. He gave her more children to cherish, more reasons to sing, more joy than she had thought possible. And together, they built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a legacy of love and family, and the courage to keep going even when the world tries to break you. Their story became the foundation story for generations of the Walsh family, told and retold, embellished and remembered, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can find you if you let it, that love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that the human spirit is capable of remarkable resilience if given the right support and the right companion to share the journey. The ranch still stands today, run by the great-great-grandchildren of Benjamin and Teresa Walsh, and on the hillside overlooking it all, two graves rest side by side, their markers worn by time but still legible. And growing all around them, every spring without fail, are wildflowers in every color imaginable, as if the earth itself is honoring the love story that started with a lullaby and a promise, and grew into something that changed the shape of countless lives.